Justice Chandrachud, I want to start by asking you straight up about the challenges India's judiciary faces. At this moment, if you look at the number of pending cases in this country, there are about 4.32 crore total pending cases. 69,000 of them in the Supreme Court, a backlog of about 59 lakh across 25 high courts. Could you start by telling us, all of those who are watching you here at the India Today Conclave, watching live on TV and on social media, about your broad vision to transform, modernize India's judiciary? Let's start from there. Justice Chandrachud.
Well, it's true that we have a large backlog of cases, but another way of looking at it is, I think it's reflective of the faith of the people in coming to court in the first place, which is not to justify the backlog. We should be discharging the faith of the people by being more efficient and by reducing the backlog. But that's just an indicator of the kind of faith people have. It also shows that there is a dearth of adequate infrastructure in the judiciary. Our judge-to-population ratio is not commensurate with what it should be in a country like ours. That's another problem. The third problem, of course, is the lack of infrastructure in the district judiciary. But now coming to your question about my vision, I think what we need to do is completely modernize the Indian judiciary. Our model for judicial administration has been based on the colonial model which we inherited from the British, which is that people have to access justice. It's also reflected in the design of our buildings, these grand colonial buildings, which were intended to sort of create a sense of fear and awe about the court in the minds of people. And I think that colonial model now has to give way, because justice, to my mind, is not just a sovereign function, which it is, but justice is also an essential service which we provide to our citizens. And part of my mission of dealing with where we should be in the next 50 or 75 years is to transform the Indian judiciary with the use of technology. We saw that in the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic was unanticipated, possibly unexpected as well. We couldn't have shut down the doors of courts. We had to keep our courts open, because you have to answer the need of citizens who seek bail. Their personal liberties are at stake, their lives are at stake, their careers are at stake. So we launched a whole system of video conferencing. And if you'd like me to share the data which I have with me, the kind of work which we did on the video conferencing platform in the pandemic is unprecedented in any part of the world. So my vision now is that, now that hopefully COVID is behind us, or almost behind us, as we would like to, because we all lived in a sense of optimism, we now need to look at technology beyond COVID. And we need to modernize the Indian judiciary. We have already taken a large number of initiatives towards having a more transparent, a more open judiciary. We are live streaming the proceedings in at least some of the most important constitution bench cases. Opening up the court's processes to citizens by live streaming them is part of my mission, because it enables citizens to understand what goes on in the court. Many citizens would actually turn up feeling that so much of the work which is done in the court is so very boring. But there is a great message which we would like to send to our citizens, because the smallest case which comes to us commands the same degree of attention as maybe some of the seminal constitutional cases which we do.
How's the experience with live streaming been so far? One of the things we saw in Parliament with our netas is that the moment the cameras are on, the grandstanding goes up. Are you concerned, Chief Justice, that as more and more cases are live streamed, you'll start seeing lawyers being more filmy and more theatrical in their arguments before you?
Well, in a lighter vein, you always have some professionals who would be given to grandstanding, right? Whether you have a camera in front of them or otherwise, it's not going to make a difference. But I have a sense of optimism. At least my experience thus far, all technology has the good part and the flip side. So likewise, live streaming also has the more difficult part of it. For instance, I'll give you the flip side as well. Very often we are dealing with very sensitive cases involving, say, marital privacy, or gender assault, or sexual violence against minors. Should you have live streaming in such cases? Obviously not. But therefore, we have the ability to now enable the judge in charge to stop live streaming where you feel that the sensitivities of the case far outweigh the public interest in a transparent court proceeding. Some lawyers would grandstand, some private litigants, some litigants in person may do that. But then we must always look at the benefits as well to be gained when you make an overall assessment in a holistic perspective.
You've spoken in public about your desire to Indianize the Indian judiciary. Do you want to explain what you mean by that, to make justice more available to Indian citizens in Indian languages? How do you go about Indianizing the judicial system?
I think the first point where we have to start Indianizing the judiciary is in terms of the language of discourse. The language of discourse is not just English in our district courts. For instance, when evidence is given in a murder trial in Maharashtra, the witness would be speaking in Marathi. When a witness deposes in a murder trial in Uttar Pradesh, the witness deposes in Hindi. But the language of discourse in our higher courts, the high courts, and in the Supreme Court is English. Now, that may be a part of our colonial inheritance. It is also because, English is the language in which we have the greatest felicity in terms of our statutes, the judgments. But if we have to truly reach out to citizens, we have to reach out to them in languages which they understand. And we've already started that mission. Just to give you an idea, there are about 34,000 judgments of the Supreme Court from 1950 until date. These 34,000 judgments were available in an official reporter called the Supreme Court Report. So if a private citizen had to access these judgments, you have to subscribe to a private software provider. They are doing excellent work, no doubt about it. But how many young lawyers or citizens across the country can pay 30,000 or 50,000 rupees a year by way of subscription for these kind of reports? So the first thing which I did when I took charge on the 9th of November last year was to digitize all the 34,000 judgments. We have a free judgment text portal. We have a search engine so that these judgments can now be searched by a citizen in the country, or for that matter, a citizen across the world, anybody across the world. But we haven't stopped at that. We are now using artificial intelligence and machine learning for the translation of these judgments. We have used a module which has been prepared by a very distinguished professor at IIT Madras, and we are now translating all the judgments of the Supreme Court in every Indian language which is recognized by the Constitution. And by doing so, we want to reach out to citizens in the language which they follow. Just last week, when we were hearing the Constitution bench hearings in one of the very sensitive issues which is before the court, and we have reserved judgment now, we have live transcripts of proceedings. So when the lawyer is arguing, we have simultaneously a transcript which is relayed on the screen in the form of a complete text. So then the court becomes a court of record. This also increases the sense of accountability because citizens then know what is argued. As judges, we are accountable also because we are then responsible for dealing with all the arguments which are made before us. The accountability is, I think, on the part of us as a judicial institution as well.